So in this brief demonstration, what I'm doing is testing out a couple of post-processing techniques for characters animated inside of Crazy Talk Animator. And this is a G2 character. As you can see, there's a lot of sprite switching that takes place. The one on the left is the original one with no post-processing of any kind applied. You can really see a lot of the sprite switching. One of the techniques that I'm using is that I have downsampled my export frame rate to 12 frames per second, and this is a little bit more consistent to traditional animation, which is animated on film that runs at 24 frames per second. But traditionally you animate in what's called twos, which basically means that you technically animate at 12 frames per second, but each frame is photographed twice for film, so that when it plays at 24 frames per second, it plays at its regular rate. All right, so we tell After Effects that this piece of footage is exported at 12 frames per second, and one of the things that we're doing with our post-processed version on the right hand side is that we applied a basic filter. It's called Twixtor, and what that one does is that it interpolates frames. It's traditionally used for slowing down footage dramatically because it takes frames and it generates synthetic frames in between each of the existing frames. So I basically told Twixtor that this is a 12 frame per second sequence, and of course interpreted it as 24. The end result is that it's adding a couple of extra frames in between other frames, so this dramatically minimizes the effect caused by the sprite switching, the dramatic sprite switching effect that takes place, and instead creates a smoother transition between those sprite changes. You can see this in the mouth sprite. It is the same exact sequence, but as you can see, the lip syncing itself is a lot more smoother. Some of the hand gestures and movements are also a lot smoother, and this is just the result of the Twixtor plugin, which basically is interpolating frames in between the pre-existing ones and just repadding it and retiming it to 24 frames per second. On top of that, I added another basic filter called Light Sweep, and this kind of gives it that that simulated cel-shaded light source. This light source can be moved around depending on where you want the light to be. In this case, I placed it on the upper right hand side, and as you can see, it casts it on the shoulder, on the neck, and it goes onto the other hand. And I'm assuming that if I play around with this a little bit more, I can probably figure out a way to create a some kind of shadow sweep as well. And it's really not that far off from the type of effects that are being used in like that new Netflix film Claws. They did a lot more, you know, complicated stuff, but this is a very simple thing, and I'm pretty sure it can lead to a lot of bigger things. You can see a similar technique used in oh my god, what is that show called? I can't remember. Some kind of anime show that's on Netflix right now by the creator of Cowboy Bebop. But it has a similar light sweep type of effect. Of course, they did it manually, so you know, it cost me nothing to be able to just drop that plugin in here and get that same effect. The other thing that I'm using is the Real Smart Motion Blur to further blur the drastic movements. This gives it a little bit more of a natural movement by blurring out the objects that move at different speeds, and it creates different levels of blurring across the different areas, and it's all done independent, you know, from the different areas. It's not just one big blur. So when you put all these three items together, I think we're we're on to something here. I'm probably not going to be playing around with this too much because I've also finally cracked the one thing that I've been trying to do all these last 2 months or so, which is to bring in the transparent image sequences into the Unreal game engine. And I gotta tell you, it looks beautiful, so I'll probably start publishing some of those videos soon. And if you have any questions, guys, let me know. I'm more than happy to answer your questions, or if you have any tips for me while I'm working on this. This is kind of a labor of love project, and I'm gonna be quite involved on this for the next I don't know, 8 to 9 months. Right now I'm just getting over the hurdle of a lot of the things. You know, I was pretty much ready to start, but I decided not to go with iClone, and instead I decided to start learning how to use the Unreal game engine to use as a alternative to iClone, which I think in this case is going to be a million times more useful. But we finally done it. I'm able to do this now, so I'm going to get back to finishing the character designs, and over the next few videos you're going to see some more involved demos. So in the meantime, if you have any questions or any tips for me that might help me out, send them my way. Let me know. Thanks.